National plans to block changes to the Māori electoral voting laws, Māori roll I should say, that it says would allow voters, some of them, to, quote, game the system. At the moment, Māori can only switch between electoral rolls, the general and the Māori roll, once every 5 or 6 years. Labor Minister David Parker and Nationals Deputy Leader Nicola Willis are with me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys. How are we feeling?
Very well, thank you.
Very good.
I'm post-COVID, so I'm feeling like I've come through the jungle.
Were you flat on the bed, knocked out, or what?
Hey, look, I was for a few hours. My husband would say it was the whole time, but it was actually just a short little while. Yeah.
And what about you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. You ready?
I'm well.
So let's talk about this proposed changes to the electoral laws, which need 75% of Parliament to pass, right? So you kind of need the Nats on this one. Why? What's wrong with it, with what they're proposing?
Well, look, it's a difficult issue. We have said that we want to make sure it's done right. And what we've said is if you have tactical voting right before a general election, that could be quite distortive to our democracy.
What's tactical? What do you mean?
So people switching from one role to the other role in advance of an election because they see, oh, that seat's got more happening in it. If I switch my vote, I can make more of a difference to that seat than I can to that seat.
So my candidate in...
Sounds like what happens between Acton, National and Epsom.
Well, the interesting thing is that Labor have picked up on that concern for by-elections.
Yes.
And they've put in restrictions for by-elections. And what we're saying is put in restrictions for the general election too,
Okay.
and then we're happy to talk.
Do you concede that your change for the by-election is a concession that the system might be gamed?
Actually, to be honest, I haven't looked in that much detail. I didn't even know that detail. So I would say overall that enabling people to exercise one vote at every election is a good thing. Maori participation in elections is much lower than it is for non-Maori, and anything we can do to encourage everyone to vote is a good thing.
Yeah, okay. I mean, granted, these are, you can't be across every single detail of every single story, can you? But I think the point that Nicola's trying to make is that you want to make sure there's sort of integrity in the system.
And fairness.
Yeah, okay. Let's move on to crime. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. We've talked about this a lot in the last couple of months on this program. One thing we haven't spoken about is the prison population. The prison population has actually been reduced after Labor came in by 27%. And remember in 2017, you guys had this sort of choice. Do we pump billions of dollars into corrections facilities and build more beds, basically, or do we try and reduce the prison population? And you've gone for the latter. Is that got anything to do, David, do you think, with the crime that we're seeing now? Or has everyone who's left prison been rehabilitated?
Well, the first thing I would say is that New Zealand has very high rates of imprisonment relative to the rest of the world. In fact, the time we came into government, I think that Israel and the US were the only Western countries that had a higher rate of imprisonment than New Zealand. Our Maori rate of incarceration was one of the highest rates of Indigenous population imprisonment anywhere in the world. An absolute shame that Bill English called a moral and fiscal failure, and he was right. So there's a couple of things that are happening here. In respect of gang numbers in prison, total gang offending is down, but violent gang offending is up. And those people are still going to prison.
Yes.
And the proportion of people who are in prison who are gang members is also up.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a complex story.
But had the people who were in prison who aren't anymore, do you know what I mean? Like, we've reduced the population. Have they been rehabilitated? Because that's the important thing that society needs, is rehabilitation of inmates.
Well, implicit in that question is the idea that prison stops reoffending.
No, I'm saying
prison rates in
rehab stops reoffending.
Prison incarceration rates in New Zealand went up for decades, but still offending rates went up.
Yeah.
So if prisons were the total answer to offending, lock everyone up, but it doesn't work. So in terms of who goes to prison, that's not a decision taken by politicians. That's a decision that's taken by the courts.
Yeah.
And the laws haven't changed.
But the direction of letting the prisoners, reducing the prison population has been set by the government.
No, that's not. The laws haven't changed. It's a consequence of who is sentenced to go to prison. And what's happening is that the people who are committing serious crimes like gun crimes, when they're caught, they do go to prison.
Yeah.
So the priority has to be keeping people safe. And right now, people aren't feeling safe in their communities. We had 23 drive-by shootings in Auckland in a 2-week period. That is outrageous. So it's not enough to just release prisoners. You actually have to have plans in place. And we have consistently said Labor is too soft on the gangs. Why didn't you establish a gang task force when we said you should? Why haven't you introduced warrantless search powers? Why are you trying to get rid of the 3 strikes law? That's not what we should be doing. We need to be keeping our communities safe. As for rehabilitation, let me tell you this story. This is an important story. On Tuesday night, I was in Wellington. I was approached by a man I've never met. He said to me, I've just been released from Rimataka prison. Here's the ticket they gave me. I've got nowhere to stay tonight. He said, I've got nowhere to stay and I don't know what I'm going to do. I might make a silly decision. That's not rehabilitation.
Well, that's a long-term problem and that is bad. I agree with that. But in terms of...
It's happening on your watch, Minister.
No. Can I just respond to the misrepresentations? You so annoy me on these issues. You dropped police numbers.
It's okay.
You cut police funding. We have got 1,800 extra police now. We have an organised crime unit. Well, you know, you ask what's... One of your earliest stories there was about one of the issues that was raised by the Prime Minister every time she goes to Australia, which is these 501s. That is changing the nature of gang activity, and you know that to be true, Nicola. These are Australian criminals being re-exported to New Zealand.
Is when Labor is in government. It's the best time to be a gang member.
Nicola, you are so superficial. You need more police, and we've funded 17.
Personal today.
Well, you know the misrepresentations that you cannot defend your record in government. You cut police numbers. You cut police.
Can I just cut
23 drive-bys is appalling.
I'm sorry. It's getting a little, I don't know, tense, a little nasty. Let's shake it off. And let's just regroup. We all want the same things. We all want to reduce the prison population.
Yep.
We all want to deal with the gangs. Let's not behave like them while we try and do that. David, so your point here is that Labor is investing and has invested heavily in the police, and that is where you will make the most difference.
Well, you and I don't go on the streets to police gangs. The police do.
Yeah.
For the police to do it, you have to have policemen and women.
Yep.
We have 1,800 extra. We have an organised crime unit. We've changed gun laws. If more changes to gun laws are necessary, we will make those too. But, you know, everyone agrees that these drive-by shootings are absolutely appalling. Have we had instances where we've had gang conflict before in the country elsewhere? Yes, we have, but that's no excuse for current circumstance.
No. All right, let's move on. Putting the snap in snap election. You might have seen an article this week by Richard Prebble, former ACT MP, where he sort of suggested, it was a lot bit of a long bow, that there might be a snap election called by the Labor Party if they need one next year. Take a look at our experience with those things.
So we got a date, Prime Minister?
We got a date, the 14th of July, which we've worked out at Government House as being the appropriate date.
That doesn't give you much time to run up to an election, Prime Minister.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
David, what are the chances, do you reckon?
That election was called the Schnapps election for obvious reasons. I don't think it'll happen.
You don't reckon?
No.
Why not? Because I think
I think that's the problem. Bring it on, I say. Look, I have a lot of New Zealanders come up to me and they say, the sooner you can change the government, the better, Nicola. Get on with it. And I say, look, I have to wait till
interrupting this morning, don't you?
David, why don't you think you'd go for an early one? Because, you know, cost of living early next year, wages are forecast to get ahead of the inflation.
Because we've got a strong electoral mandate. We've actually got a lot we're doing: health reforms, resource management reform, a lot of changes afoot, and we won't be finished by then.
A lot to do. Are you going to stick around?
I've got no plan to leave.
Okay. Nicola, you're chomping at the bit to get in there, aren't you?
Can't wait. We want to have those levers of government. We want to put in those search powers for the police, give them those tools that they need. We want to get on top of the cost of living. We want to grow this economy. We want to give people more prosperity, more choices.
All right, the election hasn't started yet, all right? OK, we're going to hug it out and throw over to Melissa at 16 minutes after 7. That's National Deputy Leader Nicola Willis and Labor Minister David Parker.